Welcome to Saints and Sinners Unplugged. My name is Ken Jones, and I'm joined by our regular co-host. We have Pastor David Menendez from Miami Baptist Church, Pastor Jose Prado from Christ Family Church, and Pastor Aldo Leon from Pinelands Presbyterian. We are four local pastors here in Miami, and we get together on this format to talk about various aspects of Reformed theology, church history, and church doctrine. Now, gentlemen, it seems like it's been a minute. How's everything going in your ministries there?
Man, I think the last time we got together was before you went on vacation, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
So it's been over a month.
Yeah,
it feels like longer than that.
Well, because you weren't here the last time. Yeah.
No,
I
was. I
wasn't
here the last time.
Oh, you weren't here. That's right.
I did the conscious one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I hope somebody out there is missing us.
Yeah.
Or say good riddance.
Well, gentlemen, as we record this, we are heading towards Reformation Sunday, and also that coincides with the secular holy day of Halloween. Mm-hmm. And as such, all the ghosts and goblins are out, and all of the Christians are clutching their pearls and having alternatives to the Halloween. As such, I think this is a good time to open a discussion on spiritual warfare in general, but in particular to talk about demons and satanic influence. Let me begin with a portion of scripture that's always associated with spiritual warfare. The Apostle Paul in Ephesians chapter 6, beginning in verse 10, says, "Finally be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." Now, by authorities and dominions and powers, he's obviously addressing spiritual beings, spiritual entities. As he says, we are fighting against the devil. So let's talk about, try to kind of walk through some of the basic teachings of the Bible on satanic/demonic reality and what the nature of demonic powers and activity in this present age. So what do we want, in beginning and talking about demons, we must begin with Satan, obviously, because he is considered the leader of the demonic forces. So let me begin by asking this question. What are demons? And two, what kind of power do they possess?
Well, I think one of the first things that I wanted to say is Satan exists and demons exist.
Okay, so
because I think a lot of professing believers, kind of ignore the reality of the existence of Satan.
You mean more functionally, not like categorically, right? Because I don't know.
I would say both. Yeah. I would say both.
I don't know. Have you met a Christian that says I don't believe in the demons?
On the liberal side of.
I mean,
Oh, you mean the actual?
I'm saying that, more of like a legitimately credible belief.
Yeah, right. But that's why I said professing Christians.
But don't you think there are two extremes? There are those on the one hand, in one extreme, that would deny not necessarily the reality, but the actual present influence or activity of Satan/demons. And on the other hand, there are those who tend to find demons under every rock.
In a headache.
Yeah, that's definitely like a Miami thing for sure.
No, it's not just Miami. Trust me, it's huge in quasi Pentecostal circles where you're talking about casting out demons, and then there's a demon for everything. Or there's a demon for hunger, or there's a demon for sluggishness.
Yeah.
There's a demon for everything, and so
but we I feel like our city, like, I think we like capitalize on it, like, in a way that I think is a little bit more emphasized in other cities, because of our Latin American influence and
Caribbean, Latin America, everything comes together.
Yeah.
You know?
So Christian paganism works very well here because of our spirituality, cultural spirituality, and I think also Catholicism, with the exercising the demon. I mean, like, so it's
So let's begin with Satan and demons. Would you agree, first off, that what we mean by demons are fallen angels? They were a part of the heavenly choir of angels. They were created in time. They didn't exist with God in eternity. They were created with God in time. At some period around the original creation. Actually, I just read a book recently from the Reform Forum. That guy, he wrote a book on Genesis, and he follows the conversation about the heavens in the first few chapters and other places. And he says that this is actually the invisible realm is mentioned here.
Yeah, it's Colossians 1:16.
Yes, that's what he references.
For by him all things were created that are in heaven, that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers.
Yeah.
All things were created through him and for him.
Okay, so that being the case,
they were created good.
Okay, and that's
created is important.
Critical.
Created
Yes.
good.
They're created
spiritual beings in the heavenly domain that was created as well. It's important because heaven is not eternal.
So would you agree that angels, like man, was created with the ability to remain in their created state or depart from it?
Yeah, they had I guess in some sense you could say a mutability as far as to their status and state. And it's interesting how in Timothy they're called, the ones that didn't fall are called elect angels.
Yeah.
It was like one little throwaway sentence. Like, wait a second, could you say more about that?
So therefore, demons are spirit beings that were created by God, and they were created in an upright state. They were created in a state in which they could consciously continue in a subservient position to the Creator, or they could rebel from it.
Yeah. And obviously, the devil, he was, when you see it through the conversation, I think is it Ezekiel 28 or Isaiah 14 that the two, where God is talking to the king, but
right?
He obviously is talking beyond the king as well, and he was the unique cherub that had a unique responsibility of stewarding the glory of God in heaven, and he became in love with the glory of God as he reflected it, and not the glory of God itself. So I guess his position in God's glorious heavenly domain became the emphasis of his obsession, as opposed to the one who was reflecting. So it reminds me of the Christian who worships his sanctification, instead of the God who sanctifies him. And
also similar to Adam in his rebellion, where he was offered equality with God, and he sought that, even though he was created in the image of God. So he wanted to be more than what he was. So we could say that Satan's rebellion is that he was not content with his created state, being subservient to the Creator, and rebelled against that and sought his own glory, as opposed to seeking the glory of the Creator. Now, here's where we begin. So when we talk about
he
demons,
took 2/3. He said he took 2/3 with him, right?
Yeah, I think that's mentioned in Revelation.
It's been said that that's the sin of God envy. So he was envious of God, the creature envious of the Creator.
And it's interesting, that's what he passes on in his temptation to God's image bearers. So when we talk about angels being created spirit beings, which means they were not with flesh, but they were real spiritual beings who had the ability to remain in their state of purity or to rebel against it. Satan being the leader, the first one that's identified as resisting and rebelling against the glory or the authority of God, and other angels, created spiritual beings, joined with him. Now, because they are spirit beings, there are certain aspects of their existence that is greater than those of us as humans who were created with flesh. But nonetheless, they are still created beings. And as you mentioned, Aldo, which I think is very important, we do need to make a distinction between everything that was created and the Creator himself. So heaven is not eternal as it's presented in the scriptures, and neither are angels. They were created before man, but they are not eternal. The only thing that is eternal is the triune God, and he creates the spirit beings. So they're not absolute, they are not omnipotent, they are not omniscient, but by virtue of their being spiritual rather than physical beings, there are certain attributes that they possess by virtue of their creation that would be greater than what our abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you, it's also fair to say that they're subservient. We're in the, I guess, hierarchy of beings. Humans take a priority. They serve us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say that.
Which is important with all of the weird angel worship.
That makes them greater, actually. So, like when we hear in Hebrews, you made man a little lower than the angels, because it so happens, it is the case that the greater serves the lesser. So, in the category of let's say ontology of being, the greater being is for the service of the lesser being.
Why would they be greater, though?
Well, I think they're greater in this sense, and I think you see it in redemption. I think they're unredeemable by virtue of being a less composite. In other words, they're simpler than we are. We're made up of body and spirit. They're only spiritual beings. Spiritual beings that have obviously their limitations, their existence from God, their potentials and attributes like that are derived from God. They're still a creature. But in that hierarchy of beings, they do not have a body that can decay and can obviously die if they lapse and then be resurrected.
Yeah, but wouldn't that be more about a fall reality than like just a corporeal reality in itself? Because Adam's body was not supposed to decay either.
But I think to your point though, David, because it does mention I've made you a little lower than the angels. It's mentioned in a couple places. So there is something superior in their composition. Yeah. But the difference with us, with man, we are created in the image of God for a particular purpose, and therefore there is a higher dignity in human existence than, say, in angelic or spirit existence.
Well, would you say that?
And by the way, they were created to serve, serving God, and they have direct access to God in their created state, whereas we were created to share in God's divine or in his authority in the created realm.
But would you say that not only do we share in God's authority in the creative realm, but we also share in God's likeness?
Yes.
In the sense that there are attributes that God communicates or shares with us where perhaps are not shared with angels.
Oh, absolutely. There. I think our physical constitution corresponds to our being created in the image of God. So we can function in the created realm, in the physical realm, in ways that they were not able to serve in the spiritual realm. So there is a degree of in terms of rank, there's a superiority to human existence. But with the angels, when we say a little lower than the angels, there is a privilege, or there is certainly something more superior to them just being spirit beings.
Yeah, and I meant this. Obviously, that more can be said, not just by virtue of their ontology, their being spiritual beings, also by nature of the realm that they occupy in which they serve God. They serve in the heavenly tabernacle.
Yes.
Well, I guess I think with the lower than the angels, that's more of an eschatological statement than it is an ontological statement. So Adam was made not to. I mean, people in Reform will disagree about this, but Adam was not made to just perpetuate in his original created state. He was made in a probationary state that had an eschatological Sabbath ultimacy, that he would have, having passed his test, he would have entered into that eschatological life. And so he had a period of man had a period of being lower than the angels in this before he accomplished his task to enter into that eschatological state. But once man is in that eschatological state, the beings of us as glorified, we certainly have a superiority over the angels. Does that make sense? Like, eschatologically, that's more of an eschatological statement. Well, where Adam was at and where we're at. But once,
I think, wouldn't you say though, and that's an interesting statement. Wouldn't you say that? And obviously, these statements of superiority, inferiority. I'm referring definitely to that statement in Hebrews that you made him a little lower than the angels, and one that stands out very glaringly is the fact that they're just a higher by order of being. Now, is there any other way in which we could say that either they are greater or we are? And I'm wondering, because at the end of the day, it seems like both the invisible realm and the visible realm unites. And we're both in the court of heaven worshiping God. If there's any kind of superiority, so to speak, it's the fact that the human theater, the visible realm, is the theater to display God's greater glory.
Absolutely.
In grace.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, and also to what you had mentioned before, Aldo, about us being created in terms of the eschatological element of it. Angels, the elect angels, will always be servants, and with the eschatological end for the image bearers of God as humans was to rule. So we were not, we're not just the servants of God, but we were created to share in his dominion and to share in his rule. So the eschatological end for Adam, had he remained sinless, would have been to share in a derivative way the authority and glory of God throughout all creation and dominion over every created thing, including angels. So therefore, even angels are put into the service of humans.
What's interesting is how in Revelation 21 and 22, and it talks about the glory of God and where we will see his glory, there's literally no mention of it in the angels.
Right.
All of God's glory is reflected in eternity. Obviously, that's not to say that they wouldn't be a part of that, but it's interesting to me that it's the church that expresses the radiance of God's glory in the eschaton, and the angels happen to just be zero part of that conversation, even though we know that they're there.
But I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I don't think it's an either-or. I think it's just one more of degree. In other words, the angels or the invisible realm glorifies God by creation. And then one step further and above is that humans, redeemed, the elect, glorify God by redemption.
Which I would say it seems to be the priority, right?
Oh, obviously, yeah. No, definitely. That's what I'm saying.
So we know the glory of God.
But there wouldn't
in redemption, and they don't.
Exactly.
Which means we reflect.
We hear they long to look into it. So they are servants.
We're better.
They're servants.
well, but I think that's why it's kind of both and. Yeah. In one sense, in the created order, there is something that is a little higher than our human, our physical constitution. But in terms of purpose,
it's in the nature, I think, even of the God that reveals himself in the Bible to have what is seemingly a greater being by nature serve the lower being, which is the recipient of redemption. There's something, I think, to be said there in the way that the glory of God is set up and manifested and displayed that ultimately ends up, really glorifying him all the more in that arrangement.
Being created as they were, upright, to serve God, worship him, and do his bidding as he has appointed them. In fact, the word angel means basically messenger. And so God uses these spirit beings to accomplish various aspects of his purpose. In the fall, now we're not talking about the fall of man, but the fall of Satan, Lucifer, as you were alluding to the Isaiah passage, the fall of Lucifer and all of the angels that join in his rebellion against God's authority, put them in a different category. Now, we know that they cannot be redeemed. And so at that point, one of the ways it's described in Revelation is that he was kicked out of heaven. So he and the angels who joined in his rebellion were no longer part of the heavenly court in the heavenly tabernacle.
Well, I actually talked about this the other day with somebody, and I was distinguishing Satan's original exile from heaven from his ascension exile, because he is cast out of heaven on to the earth, but yet he still has access to the heavenly court.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. We see that
after
especially
the ascension,
in Job.
it seems like there's the ability for him to go up there and point fingers is finished, and he's really angry about that. His time is
yes, and that's what's alluded to in the New Testament, but especially in Revelation. That
before you move on and further, just drawing a parallel, so Satan is cast out of the heavenly court. There's no recourse from that.
Right. There's no redemption.
Adam is cast out of the Garden of Eden.
Sure.
But not yet, or not necessarily from the heavenly court.
Right.
Okay.
So with the fall of Satan and all of the angels that joined in his rebellion, does that mean that they have unlimited reign and unlimited power to influence humanity?
Well, they're created, so immediately, like once creator creature distinction always makes it impossible for any created being to have any kind of divine-like attributes or realities or omnipotence and omniscience. These things, like they are finite, they are created, they are limited, they are sustained by God. They definitely don't have equal. Sometimes people talk about the devil and Christ, like, yin and yang or something.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Dualism.
This is not an equal rival power to God.
Yeah. It's
right.
In
it's
sense of ultimacy.
I mean, if you want a comparison, compare the devil to be a gnat in the face of just some colossal being or creature. It's not. They're not comparable. Let's just say it this way: like God is other from every being, including the spiritual realm.
Well, the reason I mention that is because now what we mean by Satan and demons, Satan being the chief of the demons, a spirit being who has rebelled against God, and therefore they have fallen from, as I think Peter says, or Jude, they have left their first estate. So therefore they fall into a different category. They are still spiritual beings, but now they are they are now pursuing that which is evil, that which is wicked. And they still have activity within the earth. The issue is, and I think this is where confusion comes even with a lot of Christians, somehow people assume that they have more authority and power than they do. Let me read Article 15 or Article 13 from the Belgic Confession concerning divine providence. We believe that the same God, after he had created all things, did not forsake them nor give them up to fortune or chance, but that he rules and governs them according to his holy will, so that nothing happens in this world without his appointment. Nevertheless, God neither is the author author of, nor can be charged with the sins which are committed. For his power and his goodness are so great and incomprehensible that he orders and executes his work in the most excellent and most excellent and just manner, even then when devils and wicked men act unjustly. So I think what gets lost sometimes in discussing Satan, we know that he's described as the god of this world. And when we talk about demonic activity, sometimes Christians, even if they know better because they know the Bible, they act as if evil is in control and God will ultimately become victorious over it. Here's what we understand, according to this and similar statements in the Westminster and London Baptist Confession on Providence, that everything that takes place within the created order is according to the power of God, that he enables it, accomplishing the purposes of God, even the sinful actions of demons and humans. So therefore, Satan is never in charge of this world. And God never says he is. When it speaks of him being the God of this world, it doesn't mean that he has unlimited power.
It means he's a minion.
God does.
In what way? What do you mean
He's
by
a
minion?
I mean, he does. He God is not entrusted him, but God has given him a stewardship that is negative, to basically be the loser that does loser things that God flips on his head. So he is God's puppet. He is God's bulldog. Whatever you want to say. He's
I think it was Calvin, I think, that said, God does not create darkness, but he divides it as he pleases. So he divides, he ordains, he superintends the work of evil in not being the author of evil himself,
Right.
not being the one that causes evil, not being the one that wills evil. However, once evil is allowed by God's eternal ordination to occur and to happen, God is sovereign over it. And in the same way that he stops the raging of the seas and tells it how far it can go, he does the same with sin. So he divides and oversees his cosmos for his good, eternal, redemptive, and just purposes. With absolute power and authority.
The very reason why today, we enjoy the benevolence of God in this world, and even unbelievers enjoy it.
Yeah, he restrains.
Is because of his restraining, sovereign will.
Yeah,
and
the way John describes the devil is on a chain. He's on a chain. He's got a lid on his head. Post-resurrection.
The way sometimes also he exercises disciplining of his own people.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're going to look at how God uses that. But I think the overarching point here is that
he's in control.
The activity of Satan and demons is accomplishing the intended purposes of God. So when we talk about living in a cursed creation, we see human history unfolds along two tracks. God's progressive unveiling of his judgment on his image bearers, which is seen in all of the dysfunction and disorders in the created order, including ourselves, and then the unfolding of his grace. Now, common grace kind of overlaps with those two, that he restrains for his and allows even the wicked to receive some good, even as they continue in their wickedness. So we begin in talking about the activity of Satan and demons in this world. We should begin with understanding whatever is done by them is according to God's divine purpose as he moves down that double track towards ultimate and consummate judgment and ultimate consummate reward of righteousness in the unfolding of his grace.
There's three passages I think about to that point. And the one is when Satan goes to heaven, he's reporting to God, and God is the one who brings Job up to Satan. And so the whole number two is I don't know where this is, but it's in Kings, I think, where God's in his heavenly court, and he's like, which one of you demons is going to put a lion's spirit in the mouth of such and such to judge such and such?
Yep.
And in Revelation, it talks about the Antichrist beast. It was given to him a mouth to speak blasphemies against the Most High. And so, and then in 2 Thessalonians 2, it talks about the delusion of Antichrist, past, present, and future, is a judgment of God for those who refuse the love of the truth so as to be saved. So scripturally speaking, we see that the devil is God's tool to administer righteous judgment through the wickedness that he spreads and promotes. So it's almost like I'm using you to do bad things because it is good for me to judge wickedness through the wickedness so it's almost it sounds paradoxical, right?
Well, I think Paul sums it up best when he says he gave them over to a reprobate mind.
Yeah.
So he gives them, he gives fallen humanity, he gives them even in a temporal sense, he gives them their just reward by allowing them to follow the dictates of their own fallen mind, and even spiritually continue in their resistance and rebellion against him, accomplishing a greater purpose.
Yeah, so it's so interesting. So we say people are going to be judged for false religion. Yeah, that's true, but actually, false religion is God's judgment.
Exactly.
Yeah, and ultimately, if we keep just pushing that line of thought, ultimately is to accomplish good.
Yeah,
sure.
I'm reminded of Joseph, when he said to the brothers, "It was not you who sent me to Egypt." Obviously, it was them inspired and tempted by Satan to do wrong to Joseph. But then he says it was ultimately to do you all good and to save you. Now, keep pushing that, Satan tempting people to do evil. The greatest evil that's been committed is the murder of Christ that Satan tempted humans to do. And it was all so that we could be redeemed.
Right.
So ultimately, the evil purposes and work of Satan that God accomplishes as when Satan entered the heart of Judas.
But,
redemption and our salvation.
I don't want to go in a rabbit hole, but it's funny how Satan didn't want Jesus to go to the cross. And all of his ministry, he's moving Jesus away from the cross. But after, obviously, he makes his attempts, he's like, okay, well, now I'm gonna make this really uncomfortable for you, and he rallies people to crucify and beat him and whatnot. But the thing is, like, that was subsequent to I don't want anything with a crucified Savior. That's bad for me, like that's why when Peter says, you won't die. Jesus' response is like, that's Satan's voice.
Exactly.
You don't want me to be on a cross, which is,
I'm wondering how much Satan knew.
Right.
I'm wondering if God is kind of like he uses the analogy of the hook with Leviathan, right? And I think what I've concluded is that God has used his son, the man of righteousness, as a little lure on a hook, which causes me to think, how much does Satan know? And how is he trying to second-guessing himself all the way to the cross? So I don't think necessarily he may have known that was the path, but he's always trying to second-guess the plans as he goes along and moves along.
But I think in the temptation,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, in the temptation, he was attempting, as Bishop Fulton Sheen, a Roman Catholic priest in the 50s, caused the temptations of Christ 3 deviations from the cross. And not only those efforts, but Satan himself is conscious of, as we see it in Revelation. I think it's Revelation 12, where it speaks of the dragon attempting to overtake and kill the woman who is with child. Yeah. So there seems to be certainly an intentionality.
Oh yeah.
In subverting.
But I'm wondering if it's the intentionality of the depth of the understanding of what the cross is going to bring about.
I think to some degree, yes.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing about demons, they have. I would say that as in their theology is very much orthodox, obviously. Like they
they know the truth, they just rebel against it.
And Jesus, it's interesting, like how demons would confess his offices and his nature, like you are the Son of God, the Most High, and he'd be like, shut up. I don't get orthodox testimony from demons.
Right. Well, look, even in Genesis 3:15.
That's what they know.
The announcement of the gospel. Yeah. But remember, in Genesis 3:15, God is speaking to the serpent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's telling him that the seed of the woman shall crush his head.
Absolutely.
So he knows that the seed of the woman is coming. And so he is trying to divert or trying to subvert that or prevent that from happening, whether it's in the Exodus or the period of servitude in Egypt, the bondage in Egypt, killing them in the wilderness, whatever it is, destroying the line that would bring about the seed of the woman that would destroy him.
I agree with that. I agree with all of what you have said. I think what I get the sense of is that grace, because it's the eternal covenant of grace, it's not something that angelic beings are necessarily acquainted with, not even on the side of the... So they're on the side of the elect angels, they're longing to look into it and to see what it entails and what it looks like and the dynamics of it. And in the side of darkened angels, there's guessing and second guessing how they're going to be crushed. They know they're going to be crushed. They know the messenger is coming, the Messiah has come. They know it will involve some type of confrontation, but they're not exactly sure how it's all going to pan out.
Well, to that, I understand what you mean by that, but the consciousness that the Savior would come.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And that it would be the incarnate God.
Sure, absolutely. No, I agree with that.
That seems to be the case, that they know that God in the flesh would overthrow the dominion that Adam conceded.
For sure, they knew that from Genesis 3:15.
Absolutely,
and all of the cultists is all about substitution, and atonement and propitiation through substitution, like the whole Bible.
In other words, only, and notice how slow we are to get it right. I would give angels a little bit more credit, but the Bible says that only the Spirit of God knows the deep things of God.
Oh, sure.
So I don't think angels, much less Satan, would know the deep things of the plan of redemption of God. And he got hooked. He got caught on a hook by trying to punish and kill the man of righteousness in some way. At first, he's not sure. He's hearing Jesus speak of what he's going to do, what his life is about, and he's trying to circumvent that. But he's trying to strip that.
I just think that if we take it that route, we're actually giving him a little bit too much credit.
We take it which route?
If we take it the route that David's going, I think we're actually giving him too much credit, because
I think
the way I think about it is, Satan hates the Father.
Yeah.
He hates the Father, and he hates everything the Father loves.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But even though he hates the Father and he hates everything the Father loves, he has to submit to the Father.
Sure.
And so, whatever plan Satan could have, like you're saying, he's trying to kill the man of righteousness.
He's second guessing.
I think the Father just simply says, this is what you're going to do, and that's what he does.
Yeah. But hear me out. The reason he's trying to kill the man of righteousness, it's not because he necessarily knows what it entails. It's that he's a murderer. That's what he does.
Yeah.
But, but David, to that point, though, he knows he's a murderer.
Right.
And he wants to prevent the singular redemptive act.
Not a doubt. Without
for
a doubt.
humanity. And he knows, so when the demons see Jesus and they fear, they know who he is.
Yeah.
It's not that they just know that he is Jesus of Nazareth. No, they know who he is.
But not only do they know who he is, they know his timing.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
it's in a way.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, in a way, they're saying, "Hey, you're kind of early here. What do you have to do with us now, right?
Right.
Now, at this moment."
What I find really interesting is how this is one of the people often say this to discredit Christianity, and they say there's a lot of stories about a son of God who dies and is raised again, like before Christ. So like this is just the latest version, and so I guess to the point of the conversation, the fact that a death, a substitutionary death and resurrection is a narrative that's being cast way before the actual narrative. I think it goes to show that like he had an awareness of what was going to happen, and the way he tried to I guess counter that is by creating all these bogus alternatives. That it's interesting how much there's an echo of truth in all these bogus Babylonian resurrection narratives.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so when people say, you see, the reason why this is not, we don't think your religion is legitimate is because there's so many similar stories. And I was like, that's because there's a real devil.
Notice those stories are heroes and villains, and the hero wins.
Yeah.
But in the story of Christianity, the hero becomes the anti-hero or the villain.
Yeah, it's very different.
And that depth of the grace of God is what I think Satan is always trying to wrap his head around in his malevolent ways of trying to see how he can trip him and how he can destroy him, which causes him to all the stuff that he does.
I just think that in order for you to be a deceiver, you have to know the truth.
Well,
because if I'm going to deceive
the
you,
extent of it is one thing.
right? If I'm going to deceive you from the truth, then I have to know what the truth is in order to do so. So I do believe that Satan, knew God's plan because God's plan is revealed in Scripture,
right?
And I think that they're able to, they're able to take God's word at hand and really understand it to a way that in a way that we need the Spirit of God to teach us and to reveal to us. So I think Satan knew the plan, but he has to submit to the Father. I mean, whatever the Father says, there's not a hair of our heads that Satan can touch if not by the sovereign will of God. And so, he has to submit.
Yeah, and I think he knows to some degree, and obviously there are aspects of God's grace that's unknown even to Satan, but he knows that in
something is up.
The coming of the Son of God is his condemnation. So he attempts to avert that.
Imagine how much you would know if you existed in heaven throughout all of time.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, just think about you. If you were, if you existed from that point to that point, and you also had like an invisible army of intelligence gatherers, I think you would be a very capable.
And listen,
such.
And if you are hardened in your rebellion, if you're hardened in that sense of you being able to overthrow, so you're going to continue in your desire to divert or to avert what God has planned for the redemption of the saints. But listen, we're going to have to end this part of it. We'll continue this discussion because what we want to talk about in our next session is probably more about spiritual warfare as it exists with Satan and demons, the reality of it, as well as the mythological understanding of spiritual warfare. But we want to deal with it more substantially. What our efforts were here today is to just talk about the reality of Satan and demons. They are real. They are spirit beings created by God to be put into the service of God, rebelled against that original purpose, and they are now fallen, no longer part of the heavenly court, but they are under the condemnation of God, which is progressively being unveiled, and they are eternally wicked, but they are also under the sovereign control of God. There is nothing that is done even by satanic, demonic powers that is not according to the purposes of God, as he has unveiled his condemnation on the created order because of Adam's sin. So the two parallel tracks of human history is God is unveiling progressively his judgment against original sin, and at the same time he's unveiling his grace and his salvation for those that he has chosen to save. Those paths are running parallel until the day of consummation, when there will be consummate judgment and consummate reward and the full fruit of what Christ has accomplished in his death, or in his righteousness, his death, his resurrection, and even in his present reign. We look forward to joining you next time here on Saints and Sinners Unplugged.
Nothing but the blood.